What's going on, everybody? It's ShamefulPenguin here, back with another video. Today we're doing 5 more league starters for 3.18 Sentinel League. We're going to be showcasing 5 builds that will be good on an early game budget, help you get through the acts and progress the Atlas pretty well. Most of these are going to be able to do most endgame bosses, and some of them are going to be specifically for endgame bosses. Some of them are going to be map farmers, but all league starters are here just to grind early game currency and invest it either into another character or this character. So let's take a look at 5 more characters. The first character we're going to be looking at is the Spark Inquisitor. This build kind of seems like a meme in a way, but I think this is a build that has a lot of potential. It's really fun to play. I've been leveling this in my free time just to test how early maps and leveling was, and it's actually really great as a lot of defensive layer, so a lot of hardcore players are going to enjoy playing this build. It is self-cast Spark and an Inquisitor, which takes advantage of a lot of good regen, consecrated ground, damage mitigation, and then later once you get your Merc lab and your Uber lab, you can swap into crit and do a ton of crit damage and just have a hybrid of life and energy shield as your defenses. Go into some block with wand shield. Really strong build. It can do a lot of content and has a lot of little techs you can do. Some people like to do an end game go as an aura bot and stack a bunch of auras and have a bunch of elemental pen. You can go omniscience to get the Ellie pen. There's a lot of options for end games, but the version I'm showing you here is the early game, low budget version that can do pretty much all content. Has like almost a mil DPS, but it's kind of hard to calculate the DPS because you're counting the sparks to ricochet, and sometimes it hits small arenas. It'll hit like 3 or 4, even 5 times per cast. Some end game bosses only hit once, so it depends on the arena and the boss that you're fighting on how good your bossing will be. Mapping is really smooth, really fun. I really enjoy the playstyle, so I highly recommend for like newer players. This is a really new player friendly build just because the playstyle is so simple. There's a lot of cool things you get to learn about the game, how you slam down your sigil of power, and you utilize orb of storms. A lot of really fun things about this build that's really good for the newer players, so I highly recommend this to newer players, all players alike. The second build we're going to be talking about is another Spectral Helix build, because there's another Spectral Helix build in the first video, but this time is going to be Perfect Agony. We're going to go with Assassin for our ascendancy, and we're utilizing the Perfect Agony node, which says modifiers to crit multi apply to damage over time at half of their value, and then less damage with hits. But that's really good because we're utilizing the damage over time as our main damage, and we get a lot of crit and crit multi from playing Assassin. Assassin has a lot of crit. It's really easy to hit crit cap, as well as utilizing Nightblade with elusive. So Nightblade is a support gem that we've talked about before, which makes it so you get crit multi for the amount of elusive you have, and so we just have a lot of percent elusive, and that makes our crit multi skyrocket. We could have something like 400 or 500% crit multi, which is half that value is turned into damage over time multiplier, so we can get a bunch of damage over time. And then the way poison works, you can just keep stacking it, so using a good spell like attack like Spectral Helix will allow us to apply a lot of poisons on multiple enemies, and bosses who are thicker can get hit multiple times. So we're just doing a ton of damage over time thanks to that, and all the crit multi that we're getting into damage over time. Now this build does utilize some uniques. So the Wasp Nest is a claw, and we're using claws to proc the Nightblade support. And Wasp Nest is like best in slot for claws. It's better than like a lot of like almost mirror tier gear in terms of how much damage it's going to add to our build. So Wasp Nest is your tier 1. It's what you're going to be looking for. This build is popular. The first like 3 days this unique will be expensive, but by like day 5, the first week, this is going to be like a 1C Usually this is a 1C claw, but if this build is popular, some people might be buying them. Next we got Ungil's Harmony, which is an amulet, and it's giving us a ton of crit chance, so we hit crit cap very easily. And if we hit crit cap, we're just going to be doing tons of extra damage, obviously. And the downside of the amulet is your crit strikes deal no extra damage, which we don't care about because we're a damage over time build. So this build is exceptional at bossing and mapping. It's like the Deadeye but slower, but I believe it can hit higher DPS, but its mapping is not as great. But for mapping, the one advantage it does have over the Deadeye version is that it's utilizing Plague Bearer, and Plague Bearer is a chaos skill gem that when you're dealing poison damage, you like store up the poison damage that you dealt up to a cap, and then you release it, and it makes it like a righteous fire but poison or around you, and you just kill enemies, walk in a straight path. And it's a really good useful skill that you can use while mapping. And yeah, it's a really awesome build. I highly recommend to try this out for a really good all-arounder. The third build we're going to be talking about is a good old classic build. It's the Righteous Fire Inquisitor. This build has been really good in 3.17 with the addition of the Ashes of the Stars, Legacy of the Fury boots, things like that, just to allow this build to just clear even better than it did. Has like mediocre single target damage overall unless you have some really high budget, but this build is a tried and true classic. This build's been around forever, and it's just being updated every league by Pox. And I highly recommend you guys follow his guide. It's a really in-depth guide of Righteous Fire. He's like the Righteous Fire guy, so if you're looking to get into this skill, I would watch his videos. So the way Righteous Fire works is it makes a degen on you when you use it, but if you can sustain the amount of damage it's doing on you, you can just have it up forever. So you're going to increase your maximum fire resistance, so you're taking less of the degen because it's a fire damage degen on you. You get some good life regen, and since we're Inquisitor, we can utilize one of the nodes that allows our life regen also recover energy shield. And since we're doing that, it's pretty much doubling your recovery, and since it's doubling your recovery, it's a lot easier to sustain the Righteous Fire. Plus, Inquisitor is just one of the most broken skills in the game right now, so it does a ton of extra damage, and we get to utilize that. So Righteous Fire, really fun build. Pretty much no button click. You don't have to. You can just walk around the map, left click, and that's all you can do. To optimize your DPS, you can drop some fire traps for your single target, and that'll help you burst down bosses. Fire trap is a really strong spell, and Righteous Fire overall is a really satisfying skill that you can use to pretty much clear any content that you want, and you can fully invest all your currency into, and you'll really feel it getting stronger. So if you're interested in this build, go check down the link below for the guide. The next build we're going to be getting into is the Seismic Trap Saboteur, which is one of the strongest builds last league and the league before. It's really good at killing bosses. It's really good at being on a low budget and just pumping out a lot of extra damage that a lot of builds struggle with. And Seismic Trap is a skill that might win the race for boss kill. That and Detonate Dead are going to be probably the top two. But as we're thinking right now, Seismic Trap might win just because more people have practiced it, and it's a favorite among a lot of people because traps allow you to be a lot of very defensive with your playstyle. You don't need to like sit there and cast. You can just throw it and run around. Seismic Traps actually are a cooldown trap where you throw them down, and it's kind of like Flame Dash where there's a certain amount of charges of them, and you can use them all and then not be able to use the skill until it gains another charge. So that's a downside for the clearing of the build, but we utilize other skills for clearing. So you're on another like 4-link of Exsanguinate traps where you're using Exsanguinate as the physical trap. You link that to trap support, and Exsanguinate will carry you through any clearing that you have because it has a lot of chain, and it's really good base damage. It does have some bleed with it, but this build is full physical. You're doing scaling as much physical damage as you can. Ideally, you'd want like a cold iron point if you can get it for the plus levels of physical gems, but +1 wands, +1 all fizz wands are as good, and spell damage counts because it's a trap, so you're getting you can scale spell damage very easily. There's a lot of good things going for this build that's really easy to scale damage and stay tanky at the same time, so that's why a lot of racers preferred this build. Another thing about this build is that if you get some currency with it, you can convert it into cold damage, and the cold damage will do even more damage. You'll be slightly less tanky because you're investing more into your damage, but overall you'll clear the bosses faster. You can also do a poison variant that I didn't list before, and you could also do a like a full bleed version of the build, but overall the cold damage and the fizz damage versions of the tree are the prime ones you're going to be using during the league start process of the build. And the last build we're going to be getting into in this video is the Absolution Necromancer. This build has been really wanting to be good for since it came out. The league it came out, it was a really big disappointment, but after the buffs and people fine-tuning the build and figuring out how you should play summoners, Absolution is by far one of the best early level, early mapping characters. Before, in my previous video, I mentioned skeleton mages are the best summoner. While skeleton mages have some budget requirement that you have to meet before you can fully invest into it, you actually use Absolution as your main skill until you can fully convert into mage skellies. So Absolution is a unique skill as where it's a spell and a minion skill gem, where you cast a spell and that spell will cast the minions that will follow you. And the version I'm linking to you guys is using summon phantasms on top of that to just summon even more minions and just have a little minion army to follow you. This makes mapping really easy because you'll just have a horde of minions following you, and it makes it really fun. The bossing is actually pretty good too because of the insane damage Absolution already does. So there's other versions of this build that are more softcore friendly out there, but if you're doing a league start, this is a really good basic version to follow, just to get into maps, do a lot of damage, and then either decide if you want to stay Absolution, do a ton of damage through that, or if you want to convert into something like Skelly Mages or whatever. Really fun summoner build I highly recommend to blast through content. And that's a wrap for episode number 2 of best starter builds to use for 3.18 Sentinel League. This league's going to be pretty fun because there's going to be a lot of diversity for like what people want to use. There will be a meta of like top 5 obviously, but and some people say the meta is stale because we already know what the meta is going to be, but I'm really excited for this league. I hope you guys are too, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Later.